All right, yes, you are all here for the battle for online privacy. Thanks for joining me. I'm just navigating a couple different controls here with Zoom and my presentation on the screen. So just take a second here. All right, great. Let's get started. Get out of Zoom. Here we go. So about me, my name is Dan Moriarty. I've been doing web design for 20 plus years, working in Drupal for 10 plus years. I'm on Twitter and on Drupal.org at Minneapolis Dan, sometimes more frequently known now as Citizen Dan. I work for an agency called Electric Citizen out of Minneapolis, where hopefully at some point this year we'll be hosting you all for DrupalCon. And let's get right to it. What we're going to cover today in this talk is all about privacy, the state of privacy today, what's at stake, why I would call it a battle, and see who's winning. The law and privacy, what things are changing, what you need to know to comply for yourself, for your agency or organization. What are best practices that you can start following now so that you'll not only comply with the law, but just to be a good citizen in regards to privacy. And then lastly, technical considerations such as modules or things like cookies or third-party scripts that affect privacy that we should take a look at. I am going to touch on the law. I am not a lawyer, of course. You may not know that, but it's true. But we will just touch on some legal issues for your advice, and you can do further research on your own. I thought it'd be fun, in particularly in a room where we're all there in person, to ask, why were you here? I don't know if we could try this as a group here. Let's see how this might work. Except I don't have a mouse cursor right now. I was going to ask you, so I'm going to skip that, but I was going to ask, why are you here? Are you here as a privacy advocate? Are you here because you're interested in keeping up with new laws and regulations? Are you here because you just want to understand what the best practices are in regards to privacy, or some other reason? So
Dan,
maybe we'll
you could have everyone use the chat function for that.
absolutely. What's funny is that well, I suppose if I just close out on my presentation briefly, I can switch applications. Once I'm in my slideshow, I can't just jump over to Zoom, I found. Um, so we'll get to that later. All right, so I'm going to start off on a bit of a downer here, in that the battle for privacy is not going so well. In fact, you can make the case that it's a losing battle, and some would say unwinnable. Hopefully not, but why is this? Let's take a look. So let's start with data breaches, the kind that get the big headlines, cases where a mass of personal information gets stolen from a trusted source online. Companies are hoarding tons of personal information about you in online servers, websites, and there's determined hackers and poor security that lead to these things. There's not a lot that we've been able to do about it so far. Some of the big examples, like Equifax, affected half the US with a lot of personal data stolen, including myself. You can look up to see if you were affected online still, although apparently the end of last year was the last time to add your name to be considered for whatever settlement they're offering. So I missed that. Yahoo is a famous one, 3 billion accounts, names, passwords, security question answers, all hacked. One of the more infamous ones, Cambridge Analytica, where they were able to use a small number of users using apps to access everyone's contacts in Facebook, which was then harvested and sold without their permission and used for political ads. With all these data breaches, what can we do? Well, one point is that if websites weren't collecting so much data, we'd be a bit less vulnerable. Of course, security could be better. Really, there's only a handful of solutions to these problems right now, including freezing your credit and paying for identity protection. You could uh, try to opt to quit using some of these services, but when it comes to things like a credit verification service, that's an awfully hard thing to quit using. And as I'll point out later in this talk, a lot of these services that may seem optional really are such a part of our lives that it's really hard to leave them behind. All right, so one of the more Orwellian, scary versions of privacy and danger, I would argue, is facial recognition. A great example of that is what's been happening in China's Xinjiang province, watching the Uyghur people. And this is, if this works, this is just a brief video clip of what this might look like. All right, so facial recognition, a big threat to privacy, and it's not just repressive governments that are taking advantage of that. I don't know if any of you have heard of a company called Clearview AI. Um, they are an American company, essentially started by a single individual, taking advantage of technology that companies like Google and Facebook were well aware of years ago and made the call to not make that a product because they feared the privacy implications. But because there's no law against it, someone did start a company called Clearview. And essentially, what they do is they've scraped the internet and social media, compiling this massive database of everyone in the country and using that data to match instantly to facial recognition technologies to instantly map people to all their personal information. This is something that they've been selling to law enforcement across the United States. There was a story about a New York Times reporter who sort of helped uncover this story, who met with one of the law enforcement officers using the software and wanted a demonstration of what information they had on her. When he punched in her information, or I should say scanned her face, there was no record whatsoever of this reporter, and which he thought was odd because she had a fairly lengthy social profile. The very next day, that law enforcement officer got a call asking why he was talking to this reporter, and he was then banned from using the Clearview software. So sort of a really chilling story of what's out there, um, because there's very little regulation about this. And if something with facial recognition, like this tool, got into the wrong hands, say a stalker, some kind of predator, it could be used to great harm. Um, Another example, NEC, a Japanese company who've been around for years, known for many other technologies, has quietly become a leader in facial recognition technology as well. And they are currently setting up in 20 different states across the country, working with law enforcement agencies using this new technology. All right, so geofencing, another privacy concern. I don't know if you're familiar with this technique. It relies on maps to set up sort of invisible fences or boundaries around a certain area, as in my example here on the screen, around a college, or it could be used around a church, it could be used around a political rally. And essentially what happens is that if you have location sharing on in your mobile device, then these trackers can know whether you've attended this certain event. It could be used by a political campaign to determine how often you go to church, which church you go to, did you attend that Black Lives Matter rally? There's all sorts of implications about where this marketing could be used or abused. It's also in your home with smart devices, which I'm sure many of you have. Smart speakers are a great place to start. They are designed to only work when they're triggered by their keyword, although there have been many cases of accidental triggering. I don't know if you were aware, though, that they're saving everything that you say to them. They're compiling massive databases in the name of improving their AI. They're saving your dialogue chunks, as they're called, when you speak certain phrases to an Alexa or Google Home. These databases are containing entire records of years of data on where you drove, what you buy, who you called, what you're listening to. And I think a fair question is, do these companies deserve to keep an ongoing record of your private life and consider how this could be used against you? You know, Apple, for their part, claims to privatize your recording, not making it available for any use or tied to personal records. In regards to Amazon's Alexa, you can now view and download your entire record of what they have on you if you know where to look online. Google has finally switched to letting you opt out of tracking, but of course it's opt out, not opt in. So you have to know again where to look online and take the time and trouble to have yourself removed from this tracking. But all of this tends to follow this pattern of that's pretty consistent of needing to opt out of tracking, with the default, of course, of taking your personal information. Um, I'm sure many of you have seen this was one of the most popular, well-recognized ads from the Super Bowl, the Loretta ad by Google Assistant, about a elderly gentleman asking him to remember details about his late wife. And it was a touching video. A lot of people cried. It was all over Twitter. Let's play a few seconds of it. So, you know, I don't want to rain on the parade and a touching video, but I think it's worth asking the question, when you see a video like that, is this remembering, is also Google collecting all this personal information on this individual, which then would be fed back to them in the form of ads and targeted ads. Sometimes when people are at their most vulnerable, uh, is that something that, you know, a private company needs to own your private information and use it against you? That's the question. But beyond smart speakers, it's a whole ecosystem of smart devices that we're talking about, tracking your every move. So everything from its Nest thermostats reporting back to Google when you're awake, when you're home, when you're moving about your house. It's Ring doorbells reporting to authorities when people are moving through your neighborhood. It's Philip Hue light bulbs reporting back when you turn on your lights when you're home, what energy you're using. It's Sonos reporting back what songs you're listening to. Roku, I love my Roku. It's, uh, you know, it doesn't even consider itself a technology or entertainment company. Roku advertises, well, bills itself as an advertising company. That's where their revenue comes from, is tracking all your watching habits and using that for advertising. It's car companies now realizing that they can start to take advantage of some of the same things that Google did in terms of tracking your data, where you drive, where you're going. All can be private data they collect and sell. And really, I don't know if it's even toys. I don't know if you've heard about this famous example. Anyone out there about the My Friend Kayla, a doll with an app to record and save speech? So this was an infamous case where a doll could be um, easily hacked and monitored by other people. It can also was recording and saving phrases that kids spoke to the doll saving it back to the company. These are, again, these phrases that you speak to smart speakers are called dialogue chunks. It was collecting and selling these, selling to Nuanced Communications, who in turn was selling them to people like the CIA, who used dialogue chunks to expand their voice recognition software in things like profiling for terrorists. So even at a young age, we're having people getting used to being spied on. But really the takeaway from all this is that if it's called a smart device, just know that it's tracking you in some way. So smart fridge, smart TV, smart anything, smart car, that's the trade-off. And what's the point of all this tracking? Well, it's building your public profile, knowing your school, your religion, your work, your politics, and really feeding the data brokers. These are some well-known companies. There's hundreds of unknown companies. They are doing things for credit reporting, advertising, marketing, deciding whether you are approved for a loan or getting a job. There's very little regulation, but there's billions of dollars at stake. One of the more forceful and eloquent speakers on this topic is Shoshana Zuboff in her book, The Age of Surveillance Capitalism. It's a pretty dense book. I highly recommend at least listening to her on one of many podcasts or reading some of her articles, if not trying to read through her entire book. But she really is essentially laying out the point of surveillance capitalism as describing the new controlling class. She contrasts this with a previous age where we had what we call the robber barons of the late 19th century, where small number of individuals controlled much of the wealth, power, and control of the people by controlling our raw natural resources. And today we're seeing the same dynamic play out, but going to this new controlling class, who she calls a surveillance capitalist, right? So, but rather than controlling and exploiting our coal, our lumber, and our land, like the robber barons of the past, this time it's our personal experiences, it's our human behavior, our private thoughts, opinions, and experiences. And the key to all that is not only are they doing this, but we're providing all that material, we're giving it away for free. I can't see you all, I'm realizing as I'm presenting, so hopefully you're all still there and following along. I made this, oh, I'm jumping ahead here.
Quick note, there's no audio on your video when you're playing them, Dan.
There's no what?
Audio.
There's no audio. Oh, thanks for that feedback. I would have talked through them otherwise. I could hear it. All right, so it really all started with Google. In the early years, Google, of course, established itself as a leader in search. And one of the ways it did that is it used people's search history to continually refine and improve its search engine until it became the best search engine available. But there was still a lot of question about how it would be a profitable company. But one of the side products of all their data they were collecting to improve their search was they were collecting all this personal information about people, what they searched for, what they were interested in, what they thought about. And they quickly realized how incredibly valuable this data was. And so initially starting with AdWords and expanding from there, they brought billions and billions of dollars feeding this machine with more products, better products, and gigantic profits. And today it's an entire ecosystem of tracking, or some say spying, from your phone, your browser, your email, your documents, your photos, all of it going to Google. And other companies couldn't help but notice. Facebook most famously has tried and succeeded at copying this model in terms of tracking and owning personal data. Microsoft jumped on the ship soon afterwards, Amazon as well, and it's really expanded from there. Some of them, the more dangerous examples out there are companies now like Verizon that could circumvent any kind of browser or privacy choice you make by starting the tracking at the base level of your device and internet connection itself. All right, so there's a lot at stake here. I made this nice little graphic to sort of, again, explain how this dynamic works. So on the one hand, you have you and your family or friends, and on the other hand, you on the right side of the screen, you've got your Googles and Facebooks and companies like that, right? So it starts with them offering free and low cost apps and services like search, documents, entertainment, chat, uh, all things that most of us use every day. The trade-off is that once we accept these things, they are starting to track your data. They're scraping your emails. They're looking at your documents. They're using all these things to create profiles. And what they then start to do or are doing every day is extracting private data from you, sending that back to the same companies who then in turn take your private data, which they got essentially for free, selling it to numerous companies like these data brokers. The middleman, the big companies, are making a fortune doing this. The dynamic then becomes you have the large companies extracting your private data essentially for free, making a ton of money. On the other side of us, we have companies that are then targeting back to us our own private data and making a ton of money, and really leaving us as the target, the raw material for company profits. So that's sort of the dynamic of surveillance capitalism today. All right, so privacy is in trouble. How do we respond? I should keep an eye on the time here. All right, so option one is to drop off the grid. Quit using Facebook, quit using Google, stop shopping at Amazon, pay everything in person and cash, don't use a smartphone, avoid the internet. All right, but this isn't really realistic for any of us, and that's really one of the big catches with all this is that online is such a central part of our lives that staying anonymous and also being an engaged, productive member of society is almost impossible when you think of all the ways that we live today, from conducting our banking, a lot of it's done online, finding a job, applying for jobs or searching for jobs, mostly online. Dating is mostly online these days. Filling out applications like for a college or getting customer service. So much of our lives is centered around this dynamic that it's really hard to avoid. Of course, there are privacy policies that are out there that are offered as a option. You can see what is being tracked and maybe find a way to opt out. But it's really a tough choice. This graphic you see here on the screen is indicating a number of privacy policies out there, including highlighting some of the more well-known companies. And the graph is on a scale of how many minutes it might take to read a particular policy versus how easy or hard it is to read such a policy. And a study well over 10 years ago showed back then would take an average person 244 hours per year to read all the privacy policies for sites they use. And that's about 40 minutes a day. And that was over 10 years ago when people use the internet just a little over an hour per day, a number that's now grown to well over 3 hours. And I'm sure for many of you, I know for me, I'm on the internet far more than that. And so as you see from this graph, you've got a company like Airbnb. Not only does it take close to 40 minutes to read their privacy policy, but it's very high in the scale of difficulty. And this little overlay will give you an indication of difficulty. You've got one privacy policy at the middle school level, that's the BBC, and really that's what all writing online should be targeted towards. But a vast majority of these privacy policies require education, reading levels at the college or even professional, aka lawyer level to read. So it's really kind of a false choice to be offering these. So option two is to just get over it. I attended a keynote last year at a conference where the keynote speaker, Eric Qualman, made the statement, he's not the first to say this, but that privacy is dead, and really we just need to lean into that and instead worry more about what he called your digital stamp, which he defined as the running record of your personal data that's out there now and the legacy you're leaving behind for future generations. So your tweets, your Facebook posts, your blog posts, whatever public bio is out there, worry about that. And that's really what matters for um, getting hired, for really being an active citizen. And if you do not participate, you essentially don't exist. So that's the dynamic that was put out there. And you could do, that's where a lot of us are today, focus on our best social profile, and we'll just trust that the markets will look out for our best interests. Or you could say, I like the personalized ads, right? Like, I love that this company knows that I like this particular boot, so at least I'm seeing that versus a pair of shoes I don't like. Maybe that's great. Or the option 3 is to try and fight back against this big monster. And the way we can do that is to follow and support new privacy laws. We can learn best practices. We can choose the right tools and choose responsible open source. And I say responsible because open source just in itself does not mean it's good for privacy. It has to be a choice, AKA Android operating system is open source and is a wonderful privacy tracking machine. All right, so the rest of my talk is going to be about that. We'll start with the law and the GDPR. Hopefully most of you or all of you have heard of this law. It's been almost 2 years since it took effect, the General Data Protection Regulation. And I'm not going to go into the details of the law because that's a whole talk unto itself, and others have done so quite well, including some previous Drupal-related conferences. But to quickly summarize, GDPR was created to establish guaranteed rights in regards to your personal data, how it's collected, and limiting what can be collected, empowering you to certain rights. And they include things like a right to be forgotten, which means you can ask companies, stop tracking me and remove all data that you are collecting on me. It's privacy by design, which means I am opting into tracking as opposed to the current paradigm, which is you have to find a way to opt out. And it's a right to access your personal data to be able to see what companies have collected about on you. And companies need to respect and respond responsibly when a breach happens, and these seem to be pretty inevitable, the data breaches. So having policies and procedures in place to meet that. All right, so who does it affect? It's a very broad law. It affects both for-profit and nonprofit, small company, large company, there's no size limit. It can be anyone who's a European Union citizen living in Europe or living abroad. It can be you as an American citizen while you're living in a European Union state. So it covers a pretty broad audience. I also wanted to give a quick shout out to the e-privacy directive, which came out years before GDPR, but along with the newer laws, helps define the use of cookies. And I wanted to give it a mention because as many of you have seen, when GDPR became law, you really saw an uptick in cookie banners, and they seem to be almost one of the primary outcomes of the law. I'm sure you've seen them as you browse the web these days. Everywhere you go, you see a pop-up saying that uses cookies. Usually there's a single button then that says, tell me more, or I agree, right? And really, I wanted to highlight that this is sort of the wrong approach. You don't have to agree to be tracked. That shouldn't be the only option. There needs to be a mechanism in place to handle either scenario, tracked or not tracked. And that's something we'll touch on in a bit when we touch on cookies later in this presentation. What's happened since the law took effect? Well, there's been billions and billions of dollars in fines. Really, it's not something small organizations need to worry about at this point. They're really going after the worst, most blatant offenders. But it has led to a renewed focus on privacy experience, and it also has led to new laws in the United States, which we'll touch on next. So privacy in the USA, the CCPA, I don't know if everyone's heard of that or not. That is the California Consumer Privacy Act. It became state law this year on January 1st, 2020. Anyone notice a flurry of emails being sent out the last few months with all these companies with their updated privacy policies? Particularly around January 1st, I got quite a bit in my inbox. Anybody bother to read those privacy policy updates? I'm imagining some of you raising your hands, but again, I can't see you now. So, so that's cool. But what does it do? Well, again, I'm not going to get you into the details, just a quick overview. It's very similar, in my opinion, to the GDPR at its essence. It's saying companies have to tell you what data they're collecting. You have to know if it's being sold to other people. You have to give easy ways to opt out or request your data to be deleted. And you can't be discriminated against for exercising privacy rights. That's that last bullet, which I found particularly interesting. Again, going back to this cookie concept of tracking, you should be able to, it guarantees a right to use a site, navigate a site, whether or not you agree to the tracking policies or not. So they can't, there's nothing that can be disabled just because you don't agree. All right, so as far as who must comply, it's anyone who's doing business in California, which obviously doesn't include all Americans. But when it comes to the web, you know, it's really hard to know where people are coming from when they're visiting your site. Unlike GDPR, this is only currently affecting for-profits, and it's really for larger companies with higher revenues. But it also could be anyone collecting personal info of 50,000 people or households or devices per year. And that might sound like a lot, but if, for example, you're running a blog that averages 10,000 visitors a month and you're tracking analytics, you would qualify. So then you need to make sure you're in compliance. It's really about, again, offering visible opt-out links. It's implementing security procedures. It's updating your privacy policy. And what's happened since it's become law? Well, there's billions being spent on compliance. Companies are scrambling to make private data accessible to users, being able to view and export your personal data, something most sites did not offer. So that's a steep requirement. There's been some fines issued so far. One of the more notable ones was the retailer Hannah Anderson, which was fined about $7.5 million for violating this law, which for a relatively small retailer is a significant fine. And really, there's a whole new space being generated with companies offering to help other companies with compliance. So there's billions of dollars being raised. And when it comes to exporting data, I thought it'd be fun to explore a few options on my own. So what I did is I went into one of these data brokers called Sift, and like many, they collect profiles and individuals, and you can ask for your data to be exported. So I went through their whole process of showing, providing my ID, filling out some applications, and after a few weeks, I got my data. It was shorter than I expected, but it had some interesting information in there, as you can see on the screen here. I didn't expect that it would be tracking every individual menu item I ordered from a particular takeout service, but yet it does, including what I tipped and what I paid. So it's a little disconcerting to see the amount of personal data that might be out there. In regards to Facebook, you can go on right now to your Facebook account settings, go to your Facebook information, and you can see they have options, including downloading a copy of all the information they have on you, or at least most of it. I thought it was a pretty well done operation, to be honest. I went ahead and did that. I was going to show you a live demo of that, but I'm not going to do that today. But just know that here on the right side of my screen, oops, I was able to view things like advertisers who have uploaded a contact list of my information, hundreds and hundreds of names. I'm able to clear off Facebook activity where they're tracking you on third-party sites. So Facebook is certainly guilty of a lot of privacy violations, but when it comes to this new privacy tools, I thought they were pretty well done. All right, so it's not only California that you need to be concerned about. The biggest repercussions is other states join in. There's these 4 states I have listed here that have all been considering various privacy laws. And you can easily see how this could become a giant mess for anyone trying to comply for their website if they had to do this on a state-by-state basis. The web doesn't really respect borders, and people can access websites from anywhere. So if all the laws are different, this is kind of a nightmare. And it would seem to have to lead to a national law. And yet, in this current presidential election, no one's really talking about this at this point. There was one candidate, Andrew Yang, who had talked about establishing an office at the federal level in regards to privacy protection. He's no longer in the race. The current thinking is that despite the potential for a lot of confusion, a federal law for privacy is still at least several years away. Again, it's not just the United States or Europe, it's other countries. Canada has their own privacy laws, which if you're doing any business with any of these other nations, you would want to familiarize yourself with. Australia has their own privacy law. They recently, even though it's been several years now, they're just now looking at huge fines relating to the Cambridge Analytica scandal. Brazil has a new law going into effect this year, defining what is personal data and how it may be collected. So it's really becoming something that it's hard to ignore. I also thought it fun to demonstrate this. This is a graph from last year, sort of trying to put a score to each state in the country in regards to how well they're doing for privacy rights, including things like whether states had to require a warrant to track someone's location, or whether companies had to delete personal data on request. As you can see, California, especially with their new law, is leading the country right now. You can see a lot of states are far behind. Illinois, home of MidCamp's, got a slightly better score because of some laws regarding regulating the use of biometrics, like facial recognition. But as a whole, we could all probably be doing a lot better. All right, so then what that leads to is, regardless of law, there is a practice you can start doing today, and it's called privacy experience, or PX. And just like we've adapted over the years to things like responsive design, we're still adapting to accessibility laws. We're looking at ways to improve our DevOps, our UX, our site performance. PX is another discipline and stage of projects that we should consider with every site and redesign. So adding that to your planning process. So what do we mean by PX? We mean taking planning for users' privacy and security before you launch, before there's a crisis. And so as you're starting out with a project, you're identifying your project goals, you're doing your technical considerations, technical architecture. Have a discussion about privacy. What data are you collecting? Are you limiting data collection to only the items you need? How will you use web forms and cookies and site analytics? What third-party tools are you using? How will data be exposed? So it can be a short conversation, it can be a longer planning. Obviously, it affects budget, and so it's not something that everyone will be keen to do right away. But just like accessibility and other concerns, it becomes more important. It's just something we will have to consider. And it's really about focusing on protecting personal identifying information, or PII. I'm not going to read this whole list to you here, but you can look this up online. Really, it's the obvious things like your name and date of birth, where you live, um, your face, your fingerprint. One of the more controversial, but um, I think most worthwhile pointing out identifiers of PII is your IP address. A lot of people would consider that not personal identifying information, but it has been proven that companies can use that data to associate individuals with personal profiles, and particularly if the ISPs or cell phone providers start or continue to implement tracking, it's not too hard for them to use what is supposed to be an anonymous identifier and associate that with a particular individual. All right, so what can you do? You can set clear policies. You can set expiration dates on data. Um, Following the spirit of GDPR and CCPA, you can make it easier for users to understand what data you're collecting, let them view and download it, um, let them ask to have it removed, and really set a plan for privacy. So many projects would wait to the end of the project to tack on a privacy policy, right? Just like the copyright at the end of a project that goes on the bottom of a site. You say, oh, we need a privacy policy, and throw something up there. A lot of times it's a cut and paste job from somewhere else. That, of course, does not take into account what particular data you're collecting, doesn't take into account that making it clear and easy for people to understand. Again, I know that not everyone can budget for this. There are policy creators out there now. I can't speak to entirely to their effectiveness, but I have seen that for a small fee, you can draft a custom private policy using some of these third-party services, and it's something that you could explore. Right. So I like to say accessibility isn't required everywhere yet either, but we do it because we know it's the right thing to do. We want to be good people, and judging by the way things have been going, it's going to be a requirement everywhere soon anyway. So why not get on board? I think that privacy compliance is also something that we're going to be dealing with sooner than later. So it's wise to start learning about what you need to do today. All right, so with my last minutes here, I'm going to just touch on some technical issues as they relate to privacy, starting with developers. Planning, again, how you'll manage this personal information and data you collect, starting at the initial strategy planning phases of a project, and measuring what impact if you have a data intensive project. I know in GDPR, they require something called a privacy impact assessment, which is a document where you discuss and audit and inventory any privacy risks in your project. So you may not have to go that far, but what you can do is just practice some common sense things. So most developers, including developers at my agency, when they work on a site, they're working locally. So what that means is they're copying all the data from a server, they're bringing it down to their local machine, and they're working on their various tasks and pushing it back up to the server. So as they're doing so, you could ask yourself, what personal data am I bringing down from the server on my machine? Do I need to be exposed to that specific personal data? How am I protecting it? Is it possible I could purge some of that personal data and replace it with fake data? It certainly doesn't need to be a specific person when you're testing a function like a bio. It could be or contact information. It could be dummy data. It's really about the functionality at the local stage, right? Asking when you're putting data on servers, is it encrypted? To what level? Who has access? Limiting access. And again, if you're on the content and marketing side, ask yourself, what data are you collecting? Do you need to collect? Can you limit what you're collecting? And how are you protecting users? So really, again, talking about cookies, you've seen the countless banners and pop-ups for cookies. You need to give an opt-out for people. This includes things like first-party cookies, which are on the site you're viewing. Generally, there's supposed to be things that are required for the site to function. So if you're on a shopping e-commerce site, you need to have that shopping cart functionality, which will rely on a session on a cookie. So that's fine. But marketing statistic cookies do require consent. And there's some modules that you can install today. We've used this first one here that we thought was pretty nice, the EU cookie compliance module, which will help install that banner that alerts users to what cookies are in place on the site. There's also third-party integrations of services that do similar things. I thought that WordPress had a particularly nice GDPR cookie compliance module, which I would like to see more of in the Drupal world. And it sort of essentially looks like this, where you're not only alerted to the cookie settings, but when you go to more information, you can see, like in this MailChimp example, what are the essential cookies, which you can't opt out of, but at least it tells you what's collecting. But then you can go to things like analytics or advertising cookies. It tells you what you're viewing, and you can individually opt in or out of these choices. So I think a more robust experience is really what the law is asking for, and I think this does this very well. Site analytics, again, one of the main issues there is it's supposed to be an anonymous experience, although it is collecting IP addresses. Is there a way you can avoid doing so? And there are some modules that can help with that. There's also open source analytics. I don't know if any of you have used Matomo. You're hosting yourself so that you're tracking your sites. Analytics are important. I certainly not opposed to them. But is there a way to make sure that you're not overly tracking user data? Online forms, of course, we're talking a lot about web forms. And when it comes to Drupal, how long do you keep your data that people fill out on web forms? Is there a way that you can set up a cron or some script to delete them periodically? Can users see what data you've collected? I don't know, but these are the kind of questions that you could be asking as you're building out a site. I think third-party scripts are a big one. Things like NPM and Composer, widely used on Drupal sites. Installing dozens or hundreds of third-party scripts and libraries. Who's tracking the privacy policies of all of those? Is there an opportunity where those could be abused? There certainly seems to be. So that's something to be aware of. If you're doing things as simple as embedding a YouTube video on your page, that can be, whether a user chooses to play it or not, once it's loaded, it is tracking that user for the rest of their session. Same with these nice sharing widgets that you might put on a blog post, regardless of whether you use them or not. Once they're in place, they are tracking. So there are things to consider. Really just being privacy smart, relying on encryption of data. That's really the #1 tool in protecting users and protecting yourself. There is something called the Earn It legislation out there now being considered, which you want to look into. I won't have time to get into, but I can talk about that later. Supporting advocacy organizations like the ones listed here, considering ethical design, open source, making ethical choices when it comes to user privacy. And of course, when I'm talking about ethics, what I'm really talking about are Tethics and the Galvin Belson Institute of Tethics. We should all read and sign if you're a fan of Silicon Valley. Drupal specific, I'm running out of time here, so just know that there's a number of modules that will do things like anonymize your IP address for users. It'll prevent scripts from loading and tracking or videos from loading until the user consents. You can use tools to sanitize personal data when you're working on sites. Really, the final takeaways is I really just want to encourage everyone to avoid getting numb with the way things are today, understand the new laws, and know that all of us, especially those building the web, have a role to play in making the web safe and protecting privacy for everyone. So that's my talk. Thank you so much. I'm going to exit my slideshow now so I can go back to Zoom and see you all. And
If you have a question, since there's only
thank you
a few
so
of
much.
us, please use the raise your hand button, or to kick things off, somebody just wants to unmute and ask your question. Other than that, if you go to the manage participants option in Zoom, there should be an option by your name to raise your hand. Or does anybody have a question? Can people unmute themselves?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Well, excellent talk. I was just thinking that perhaps you had yet to find sites such as takeout.google.com, which is a website that allows you to export all of the data that they've got on you, including all of the data smart devices may capture.
Oh,
and
nice.
There's another site, myaccount.google.com, which allows you to delete any of the data that they capture, including the data that smart devices may be capturing that you could be speaking.
All right, great. That's good to know. I know I didn't mention it, but in regards to cookies, I know that Chrome is one of the browsers that does not block third-party cookies from tracking. So if that's a concern of yours, you still, as of today, have to go to Firefox or Safari or some other lesser-known browsers. Let's see here. Do we have a message?
Yep. Type in your questions
There's a
in the chat
question
that you
here.
can too.
Yep, a question in the chat. Are you aware of any tools to help automate privacy audits or scores? I'm thinking of how 1Password can alert you to a password breach. Well, I really do. I use 1Password, and I do appreciate what they're doing. I am not aware of any tools for automating privacy audits or scores. I think maybe the question is in regards to how your site is performing. Is that sort of the gist of that question? Okay. He says yes. I am not aware of that, but that is sounds like a wonderful opportunity. I know there's automated tools for checking for accessibility. So it seems like it would be hard to do because it's really looking at maybe how your site's constructed, but it could point out, well, you're loading this script, you're loading this cookie, you have this form. So yeah, there's certainly an opportunity there. And if I find anything, I will certainly share it. That's a good question.
Yeah, I've got a question. First of all, love the talk. I love this idea of, personal, what do you call it, like privacy experience management?
Yeah.
That's a really interesting idea that I think we're going to see pop up a lot more. I'm curious if you've dealt with companies like, like Acquia pushing right now, their cohesion product, and this whole suite of products that's for content customizations for customers. Have you seen anything from them about privacy concerns, or do you know anything about how Acquia or companies like that, how this would fit into this whole privacy experience discussion?
Again, a good question. I apologize for not being up to speed on Acquia's state of things. I can tell you that one of their competitors, or what they view as one of their competitors, Adobe, has been rapidly moving into the Google space of harvesting personal data and using it for profit. So I wouldn't be surprised if that is something either part of Acquia's future plans or they're feeling pressure to do so. But that's something for some further research. And certainly we'll look into that. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
All right. Any other questions out there? Well, if not, everybody, feel free to take yourself off mute and give a round of applause here to Dan. It's all takes a moment to do that. You're on mute, Chris. I can see you.
I can see you applauding, but that's good. Thank you so much. And for going through this with me. It was certainly a new experience for me to give a talk and not be able to see my audience. So thanks for bearing with me, and hope you have a great rest of your day.
All right.